Good evening. The work session of the Bel Air Board of Town Commissioners for November 12th, 2024 is now in session. And I'm going to call the roll. Commissioner Rutledge?
Here.
Commissioner Taylor?
Here.
Commissioner Chance? Here. And as we suspected, Commissioner Chismar cannot be with us this evening. First on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move that we approve the agenda for this evening's meeting, November 12th, 2024, here at the Town Hall of Bel Air.
Thank you, Commissioner Chance. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. And any discussion? All right, Mr. Grants?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for approval of this evening's agenda, November 12th, 2024. Commissioner Rutledge, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor?
Aye.
Commissioner Chance?
Aye.
And Chair Edding.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, first we have the Town Administrator's Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only have one thing this evening, and this was a request by the Executive Director for the Downtown Alliance, Jenny Earhart, to report that they conducted a cleanup of town over the weekend. They had 200-plus volunteers participate, and they collected over 1,440 pounds of trash in the downtown Main Street corridor. She said what was unique or unusual about this particular collection was that they found in town shopping carts, discarded concrete, and other larger bulk items that you would not necessarily expect to find in the downtown, but they did. So she was very pleased to report that. So again, 200-plus volunteers and 1,440 pounds of trash were collected. So that's all I have for me.
Well, thank you. And that is a tremendous amount of trash, and 200 volunteers is just really impressive that she's able to muster that kind of workforce to go out and clean up.
One of the things that they do, the scouts participate. Mackenzie Updike, who passed away, I believe it was 2 years ago, was a young Girl Scout, up and coming, very well liked. I think the original thought was her scouting, immediate scouting community wanted to do this in honor of her, and apparently other scouts picked up, and so a number of the scouts volunteered their time in honor of her memory.
What a very nice thing to do. All right. Anything for the town commission, the town administrator? All right. Our tentative agenda for our town hall meeting, which will be Monday, November the 18th at 7 p.m. here in Town Hall. First, we'll have a presentation. The Small Business Saturday Proclamation will be presented to Jenny Earhart from the Bel Air Downtown Alliance. Ms. Robinson, you have anything to add to that?
Sure. With your approval, we'd like to present that proclamation to the Alliance declaring Saturday, November 30th, Small Business Saturday. Small Business Saturday is a nationwide initiative that's actually only 15 years old. I was surprised. It feels like it's been around forever. But it's aimed at encouraging our community to shop at local small businesses, which fosters both economic growth and community vitality in small towns across the country, as well as here in Bel Air, and we've participated for many years. As a state-designated Main Street, Maryland community, Bel Air takes a lot of pride in supporting our small businesses and encouraging people to shop in our downtown area, and the Downtown Alliance has been a vital partner in supporting that mission for us. They dedicate a lot of time to promoting our local economy and promoting Bel Air as a thriving business destination. So we just want to encourage everyone to support our local shops and restaurants on Small Business Saturday and throughout this holiday season, and appreciate your willingness to proclaim it as such.
All right. Anything further on Small Business Saturday? I think we're all looking forward to getting down to shopping for Christmas and enjoying the not having to pay any of the parking meters while we're shopping at our downtown small businesses to help out a little bit. And we will have a proclamation for Municipal Government Works Month. And who would be, that would be Mr. Krantz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an annual event put together by Maryland Municipal League, where the Maryland municipalities all get together and celebrate the services that the local Maryland municipalities bring to their community. So it'll be an opportunity for us to take some action photos of our municipal employees doing their jobs and share it on social media and share some of the other good services that we provide to our citizens. And November is the month in which it happens, so we're requesting that the board call November Maryland Municipal Government Works Month in the town of Bel Air, or proclaim it, that is.
We will proclaim it, even though municipal governments work 12 months out of the year.
That's
always
right.
on, always, every month. All right, anything further on that? All right, and then we will have the Appearance and Beautification Committee Yearly Awards presentation. Mr. Klein?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, on Monday night, the Appearance and Beautification Committee would like to present their annual awards for beautiful residential homes as well as business. And they will also be awarding the Phoenix Award, which is an award for those people in town who have really gone far to improve the look of their home. So they look very forward to coming Monday and doing that award ceremony.
I'm looking forward to seeing
Yeah.
what properties won this year. It's always a,
And Christy Sudbrink has provided a great slide presentation again, so it should be good.
I'm looking forward to
Yep.
it. All right, anything else? All right. Also, on Monday, we will have both a public hearing and conduct our unfinished business for Ordinance 835-24, repealing Ordinance 815-23, amending the Bel Air Town Code, Chapter 37, Elections, Section 37-1, Definitions, and Section 37-6, General Elections, subsection C, filing of certificate of candidacy, and adding Section 37-26, Campaign Finance Reporting, and Section 37-27, Limitation and Use of Campaign Contributions. Mr. Krantz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That ordinance, 835-24, will effectively cease and desist ordinance 815, which was passed last year. But it was passed with a delayed effective date of January 1st of 2025. So this ordinance 835, if passed, will stop that one from going into effect and effectively cancel out any of these amendments, which included primarily campaign finance reporting and campaign finance contributions.
So we'll essentially be maintaining the status quo as far as how it's always been handled in the town for elections.
If it's passed, there'll be no changes made to the code, and it'll maintain the current language as it reads today.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Krantz? All right. Under new business, at our next meeting, we will also have the election of the chair and the vice chair. I will warn Ms. Thompson that that requires her participation. I think we failed to do that last time. She was a little bit surprised. Any discussion of that? All right. And then we will also have the Verizon wireless contract. Mr. Krantz.
We asked the board to approve this 2 years ago, and altogether the town has about 110, approaching 115 cell phones or lines of service that we issue. This would be asking the board to approve up to 125 units to give us a little bit of wiggle room for a amount not to exceed $72,963 approximately. That would give us a little bit of wiggle room, and the way I understand it, that the town only pays for active units and lines of service. Mr. Forth, our technology manager, is always in constant contact with our Verizon representative, and they got us the contracts through the General Services Administration Federal Supply contract for Verizon. So it's on a competitively bid GSA contract, and we'll be continuing those prices, but we're asking for a slightly higher. Last time we did it, I think it was around $60,000 asked not to exceed. This time it will be asked not to exceed the $72,900. And they're essentially just cell phones for the police department, for the public works department, for the various other departments.
So essentially, we're piggybacking on a federal contract.
Yes.
Which hopefully gets us a much better price, since they're a much larger organization.
Correct.
So you have to have cell phones. It's just the way it is these days. Computers, cell phones, we're very dependent on technology. Any questions for Mr. Krantz about that? All right.
Okay.
Staffing update, Mr. Krantz.
Yep, thank you again. We recently had a candidate for the position of laborer begin the background checking process, so we are in the middle of that right now. There are no positions posted as of this moment, so I know there's still a few candidates processing through the police department, but I hate to say it, I might jinx myself, at the moment, we're in pretty good shape. I've also included in your packet the report for committee positions that are expiring through spring of next year. And you'll see some of the ones that are coming up for the Seniors and Citizens in Need Committee, the Tree Committee, the ABC, and Cultural Arts Committee, which might be expiring here in December. So if there's any discussion around there, just let me know.
Looking at this list, I believe that Deborah Hanley wants to continue. I did speak, or I emailed Mike Simony, and he does want to continue in his position in the tree committee. I cannot remember if I asked you to send him the link or not, but that would be a good thing to do if I didn't already. Send him the link so he can just do that. I know I emailed him asking him to, and just some kind of basic resume, since 3 members of the board have never seen him before. And Christy Sudbrink, I believe, wants to continue, and I wasn't sure about Peg Lucas.
So I emailed Christy this morning
Mhm.
and sent her the form. I haven't heard back from her yet, but I would imagine that she's interested in returning. So
would
I
too.
let her know to send in the form. We'll probably have her for the work session on the 26th, final vote on the 2nd. And I think we'll be good there.
All right.
Peg Lucas is also put in her application as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, there you go. Then it seems like we got everything in order up until March. Should
And
be
we do
good.
have
Be terrific.
Deb Handley's application as well.
Great.
so.
Great. All right.
Also, Madam Chair, Commissioner Chismar's aware, but Shannon Abel submitted his resignation from the Board of Appeals, so we'll be looking for a replacement for him.
That ad is still on the website homepage for
Okay.
Board of Appeals. We can refresh it on social media.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for letting us know that, Mr. Small. All right. Anything more on the staffing update?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Krantz?
Yep.
I think there was at least one member of the public that inquired about whether a position was still open on the Board of Appeals, and we had filled that.
I had replied that we had recently voted and appointed Patrick Richards.
Right.
To that
So would you
individual.
reach out to that individual and let him know that there's another vacancy?
I can do that, yes,
I would really appreciate that if you would do that.
certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out. That's a good idea. All right. We're finished with our staffing update. We have the calendar. I did go through the calendar, the last calendar that we got, and I didn't notice anything that was a conflict or anything else. So now we've got one going through January. I cannot believe it is practically Thanksgiving. Christmas is hard on the heels of that, and then we'll be into the new year. You know what I'm not sure I see on here is anything regarding the Bel Air Academy? The Bel Air Academy that you were running? Okay. It was, the end of January was the date that I remembered,
Right, I need to give that to Ruth.
because I know that in the last week of January, I will not be here, but I will send an email and give everybody the details on that. And I think it will only affect really that work session, but I did remember the Bel Air Academy would also affect.
One thing I noticed here on January 21st, and the Board of Appeals might not meet, but if they do, they're scheduled to meet at Town Hall at 6, followed by a town board meeting at 7. So
That does happen once in a while.
does it? Okay.
It's never actually been a conflict because the Board of Appeals has not had business, but it is a possibility.
Right, I mean, Board of Appeals only meets infrequently,
Right.
but we'll keep that in mind.
I've never actually seen a conflict actually happen, but it is a potential issue. So thank you for pointing that out. And I'm sure Mr. Schmull will keep an eye on it, and we'll figure something out if that happens. Anything else? All right. Under miscellaneous, all right, let's see if I can pronounce this correctly. Discuss the Bel Air sesquicentennial time capsule sealing ceremony planned for 12/16/2024. Mr. Krantz. I love the green box. It's really just perfect.
Well, that credit goes to Department of Public Works and Mr. Steve Klein for making that happen. That was an outstanding,
It was. I actually looked at that box in its unpainted state on the internet, and it was just a plain, nondescript toolbox, but it really is perfect for this. And I think it was Hartford Custom Coaches did the painting.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we-
They gave that to the town.
It is
Yeah.
gorgeous. It is just perfect. And I know Mr. Krantz also put together the decal that's on the top of it.
and we got that, and Brian Mullaney, I think, and Matt came up, and they bolted it to the front. So it's a nice,
It's solid.
thick piece. It's not just a decal, so it's a nice, thick piece of engraved bronze.
It is
that's,
really, it is just
bolted
really,
to the front,
really
so
special.
It should
and
definitely last the 50 years. that's
Commissioner
for
Taylor
sure.
will be checking.
Yeah. That's right.
We'll be there checking.
Outstanding, outstanding. So the thought was, last time we discussed this, is that, what will be the culminating event of the Bel Air 150th anniversary? And the suggestion at the time was it would be actually locking the time capsule, which we will go out and purchase some padlocks and then throw away the key as soon as you lock it. And it will be locked and here in the lobby of Town Hall for the next 50 years. So I think we would like to recognize a handful of people, including Julia Potler, who was instrumental in many of the Bel Air 150, if not all of the Bel Air 150 events that happened around town, coordinating and facilitating many of them, as well as some of the individuals on the Bel Air 150 committee. We'd like to give them certificates of recognition as well, too. And the young man who designed the logo that we've been so proudly displaying around town, there's a thought that we ought to present him with a certificate of recognition as well. And then I'm kind of open to other suggestions if there's any speech necessary. I would request the commissioners maybe put their thinking caps on, and if any of you or all of you would like to speak that evening, we can build an agenda around those types of activities.
Sounds like the beginning of a terrific plan. Anybody have any thoughts, ideas?
Just a reminder to everyone watching or here to get their items in
Absolutely.
before that time. We want as many encapsulations of what the town of Bel Air was like in 2024 to make it into the box, so that when I'm standing there with my grandchildren in 50 years, we will have an I remember when story of all of my wonderful friends here.
That's exactly right. Many of the departments, most of the departments will be submitting photos and little short essays about a day in the life of. And I certainly encourage citizens to do the same thing. The box is getting full. I will add that. So if anybody is thinking of submitting something larger other than a photo or essay or things that would fit in an envelope, then we might start to need a bigger box. But from this perspective, I think we'll be just fine. And that's been pretty much the type of submissions we've been receiving, messages to future loved ones and relatives and things that happened around town in the last 12 months.
And I know when we opened the time capsule this summer that many families were really thrilled to find that there were photographs and other mementos in the box from their families. So it's really kind of a neat thing to speak to the future from the past. All right. Anything else on the time capsule sealing?
Okay,
All right.
those are the things I'll plan for then. I'll plan for those certificates. I'll get drafts written and
Absolutely.
circulated for signature over the next few weeks. And if anyone has any further thoughts or ideas, or if anyone that would like to invite, I will put it on social media and try to advertise that evening. So citizens who would like to come and observe the ceremony, which will be rather informal, but there'll be some formality around it in terms of the issuing of the certificates and maybe some good words.
Sounds like a great time right before Christmas.
Okay.
All right, next on our list is to discuss Resolution 1221-24, which amended Resolution 1211-23 and extended the use of tent permits and temporary use permits due to COVID-19 in the town of Bel Air through March the 31st, 2025. So this is an extension, but is set to expire March 31st, 2025. Mr. Small, you want to just give us a little recap on what it does?
Sure. This has been, I think, I want to say the third extension, the end of the third extension, which again would go through March 31st, 2025. It allows for the temporary use of tents and temporary use permits, but the tent permit and temporary use permits to extend past their temporary use permits normally ends at 30 days. Tent permits normally end 6 months. Those would extend for the term of this resolution. So that's due to expire. If that does expire, anyone utilizing these allowances would have to bring their property back up to code at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Small. And my feeling is COVID is over and has been over for some time, and so I will be happy to just let this expire as it's scheduled to do on March the 31st, 2025. But since we did have several extensions, we wanted to make sure that we were clear to those that might be depending on this, that how the board feels about it, not to bank on another extension.
Could you talk about what Harford County has chosen to do with these?
Sure. Harford County addressed the issue surrounding outdoor dining or these temporary uses differently. They changed their code, and then they put a sunset provision in their code that would basically revert it back to the way it was prior to that. What the town did is, instead of changing the code that you find, in our in various chapters of the code, of the town code, we just handled everything through a temporary use permit or a temporary tent permit. And that the difference is that no changes happened to our code at all. And the county could easily just extend or make permanent their code changes if they would like to do that, which I believe they've extended another year to go to end of 2025.
Mm-hmm.
But you would have to
Right.
affirmatively head in that direction too. One thing to remember here is the way that this has worked in practice is that an entity who wants to take advantage of these allowances would submit a temporary use permit, it would get approved, and then that would go through the length of the resolution. If they go beyond that, if they do something outside of those parameters, then they would have to apply for a normal temporary use permit that would outline exactly what they're doing. And in the case of some locations or properties, they would have a temporary use permit to put a tent up and to have outdoor dining, but they wouldn't have one for outdoor music. And then that would only happen whenever they had outdoor music that are in locations different from that underlying permit. I know that sounds a little expensive or a little confusing, but whereas the county, they have their code. If you're meeting the code, then you're in good shape.
I'm not sure that I want to put the town of Bel Air too far out of step with the county on this issue. And so I think that's something, I mean, I know that we handle it differently, but the policy result is what I'm concerned with. And so that might be something that, you know, as we come to the expiration of this temporary use permit in March, and of course pending the feelings of the board, Kevin, if you would be so kind to work with me on what that might look like for us.
One of the things we might be able to do between Director Klein and myself is to identify what the county allows through their change of code and how different that is from the town, because they are they're not covering the same issues.
Sure.
So that's something that might help you understand whether we're in step or out of step. And one of the things to remember is the county is dealing with totally different issues, whereas the town's much more urban, much more dense. So those are the things that we can certainly bring to you. We can send you an outline of what that might be, what those differences are.
Thank you. I would appreciate that.
Yes,
My only question at this point is, how many actual businesses are we talking about this thing affecting, this resolution affecting?
Well, up until about a month ago, there were 2. Now there's 1. The Z-Vault had outdoor dining, still does, but they're not open. They closed their doors.
They're closed, right?
If they reopen, they're going to have to deal with that.
Mhm.
And either they get rid of the tables and chairs that are out in front, or they come back in for, apply for an approval.
And
The other one is Independent Brewery.
And this doesn't affect Sunny Day when you talk about,
No.
okay, because they're temporary in and out, or,
Well, they operate under a different part of the code. Anybody who puts chairs or tables out on the public sidewalk operates under the sidewalk cafe portion of the code. And that has never been something that was required to apply for a temporary use permit, because we couldn't give someone a temporary use permit for property we don't own or they don't own. So this is something that is purely for public sidewalk use.
okay. So the only business that we're talking about, really speaking about at this particular moment is Independent.
Yes.
I think we need to think long and hard about what impact this has on their business, and being reasonable. And so I have lots of thoughts about making it too difficult for them to continue doing what they're doing. I don't live that far away from that business, and I'm finding it very acceptable as it is today. So I would just really like to think long and hard about what impact we have on a business that's functioning and doing well and bringing people into the town, and so.
I think I copied you on the letter that I sent to Independent Brewery, because it goes through in pretty extensive detail what they would need to do. The 2 big items there is they have 2 large tents in the back. Those 2 large tents are there because the COVID resolution allowed them to be there.
Right.
They also have a parking lot that's across the Ellendale, which has never received any permits to be used, and that would have to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand. I do, I understand.
If I may, I asked for this to be placed on the agenda tonight for discussion precisely because now is the time to dig into the details. Not in February, not in March, because then it's going to be, oh, we can't do anything, it's going to hurt Independent, they haven't had enough notice, nobody knows, so unfair. Nothing unfair about this. There's an expiration date stated in the law. The affected party has every opportunity to come forward, propose how they're going to comply with whatever they want to see changed legislatively, Jake, or Commissioner Taylor. As to the point about us falling in sync with the county on this one, I have to respectfully disagree that I don't think at all that following the county's lead with regard to what happens inside the Bel Air town limits on this issue is particularly persuasive to me, or particularly apt or relevant. I had many constituents during my campaign specifically single out the music loudness problems. When you crank up a band in a tent, as far as I'm concerned, that's just like being outside. I mean, that's the way we dealt with it on the farm with parties. We knew that was going to be loud, whether we had a tent, whether we had 3 tents, 4 tents, 5 tents, or nothing for sound barriers. So my big concern is outside music, and as far as I'm concerned, music in a tent is outside. And I don't like the idea of the police having to run around, take precious time out, stick up the little meter in the air and stuff. There's a lot of people that voted in this election and that had serious issues with regard to what do we deal with sound at entertainment venues. So I don't want to, so that's why I asked to bring it up, because I'm sure there's going to be certainly a lot of legitimate concerns, Commissioner Chance, about, what effects it'll have on a business that's doing well, and that has to be weighed carefully with the interests of the citizens. And the other thing is, we have a business that financially benefited from COVID, that continues to financially benefit from a COVID emergency. There's no COVID emergency. It's time to end the COVID emergency. I'd like to hear from the Planning Commission, because the code does provide that the Planning Commission could make legislative recommendations for changes in the code that, if I'm wrong, I'd like to hear from them. They've got some expertise. Let's put it on notice to them that that sounds like we're going to be heading towards some proposed legislation. I'm against just another wave the hand to do another extension. Let's put the meat on the bone and get down to these conflicting issues.
I have no disagreement with that. I agree the COVID emergency is over, and really what I'm talking about is what is the prudent policy moving forward permanently, not to get too alliterative. So I completely agree. I think these are important issues that we need to sink our teeth into. I share Commissioner Chance's concerns about not wanting to sink a brick too much on an important business in town, but I also heard the same concerns about noise complaints, and I think that there are ways that we can accomplish this all together. One question I might have for you, Mr. Small, if we were to make let's just go out on a limb here, make a permanent TET permit, could that permit have different noise restrictions than elsewhere in the code? Say after 6 p.m. as opposed to after 9 p.m. What are our restrictions there?
Right now, anything in the tent would be considered outdoor, because really a tent doesn't stop the noise.
Right.
If you have music out in the tent, it's got to stop at, I believe, 9 p.m. And so that the way that the code reads is 9 to 9.
Yeah.
And that actually applies to a lot of other things. It applies to outdoor recreation, which, you
Right.
could talk about the cornhole and things like that. But in the case of IBC, I believe that they're closing at 10. I can't say for sure if that's the correct time, but I believe it is 10 o'clock. And they've always been very good about shutting down their music at 9. But one of the things that we would have to look at is where that music is at, and it's different for every location. One of the things that we added to the code about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, was to require that any time somebody is doing music and the doors and they have to close the doors and windows if it goes past 9 p.m. And that was because the tower, you could hear the music, a long way away. And so we were trying to make sure, and there was also another entity in town that was doing the same thing that we were trying to make sure that we addressed, because it was just going, it starts to disturb people when it goes past 9.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So those restrictions we could certainly review to see whether or not we allow outdoor music past a certain point, or even have them shut down earlier, because those are reviewed individually. To refer to Commissioner Rutledge, every time that somebody does outdoor music, the Planning Commission reviews it. And the Planning Commission would review and decide whether or not music needs to shut down earlier, depending on where it's at.
Right, and so that then, the proximity consideration, that belongs with the Planning Commission, is what I'm hearing. That's not necessarily something that we have within code, other than depending on what zone you're in.
There's various impacts. What we look at is the definition of adverse impact, because that has a kind of a long history of zoning code reference.
Sure.
Adverse impact doesn't mean that you go over a certain number of decibels. It means that you are creating an impact to your neighbors that is over and above what would normally be something for the use that you have. And that's somewhat subjective, but it does go through a public hearing process. So it's certainly vetted by not only the public, but also the Planning Commission, or in some cases, the Board of Appeals.
But it is being regulated in the same way as any outdoor music.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I didn't mention, is that we use the same outdoor dining restrictions on all of these temporary uses that have been approved. There were a lot more of them 2 years ago. Now there's just one. One of the things that I mean, I'll throw it out, and the chief might be able to correct me. There's no restriction that says we have to adhere to the same amount of decibels that the state has. We have state decibel limits. We can't relax them, but we can be stricter. Am I correct?
I'm pretty sure that they're the same decibel levels as the state.
We are. We use the same as the
Same
state.
level.
Yeah.
And from what I can remember, the state levels has been delegated to the county as the ones that are the primary keepers of
Right.
keeping an eye on the sound, although we try to keep the peace, if you will, and we'll try to deal with it ourselves so it doesn't have to go to that level.
Right.
And we've always had a high level of cooperation out of Independent, and making sure that they've met the proper levels. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
I think the big concern that I heard going door to door, as well as just a recent complaint, is that perception is reality when you're perceiving a disturbing level of music in your home, and I can't just blow people off too quickly. I just am not inclined to just say, well, this is a marginal person that's overly sensitive, because they've invested money in their home. I'm inclined to give those type of complaints a serious amount of weight, and if it requires a reevaluation of when outdoor music has to stop, when it could be permitted to, what the whether we get into we certainly, I think, have the authority to implement our own decimal levels that would be lower, but I'm not really sure that's the solution, because decimal meters, is probably some science to this, are reading certain levels of frequency. Different people have different hearing levels of different frequencies. I have moderate hearing loss myself. I understand this. And I just don't want to, that's why I like to get as much of this on the table to deal with now, not singling out independent. It would affect anybody that was going to have outdoor music if outdoor music is the issue. But the other matters with regard to, the tents and all that type of stuff, like I said before, I think this business has done a great job of being innovative and financially benefiting from the relaxed standards during COVID, but they're the last man standing. So does that warrant special treatment? No.
But it wouldn't necessarily be special treatment because, as you said, if future people come forward and want to avail themselves of this opportunity, they would be able to do that. And I think what we've discovered, and I'm totally willing and ready to have this conversation about outdoor music in general. I just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because we've determined a way that, the government can sort of pull back, allow business to, bring value. And I don't want to lose all of that, because I don't think we have to. I think that we can have this conversation. I'm glad that we're talking about it now and not in February. I think that we can have this conversation about outdoor music and excessive noise without foregoing the entire, arrange. Because it's not just, as you're right to say, it's not just about this one business. It's about the opportunity for any business that might come to Bel Air in the future to be able to offer this to its customers. And I think I agree with you. We might wind up disagreeing on how those things are weighed, and we'll talk about them together, and I think we'll be able to deliberate and hopefully come to consensus here. But it's about weighing, an important community partner with the very important voice of our constituents. Absolutely, I would never brush anybody off. I heard similar things. We've received complaints. I want to give those the months of consideration that they're due. And I think that we can find a way to essentially make the neighborhood work in tandem. And I don't think that we need to cut off one nose to spite the other face.
I appreciate that, and that's why I was saying, I like the idea of trying to, deliberate upon, get as much input as we can, and have a deliberative process here. And just wanted to make it clear that I'm against just another extension.
Sure. Yeah, and I get that.
I think
that's
some more
reasonable.
permanent solution
Yeah.
is important, and I think that people in commerce need, predictability.
I completely agree. It's always good to have things and know where they are, know where they stand, as opposed to could be gone in 6 months. No complaint for me there.
Commissioners, real quick, just to add a little further elaboration, this is a quandary for the police department because, like you've kind of touched on, we do have the decibel levels, but again, there's subjectivity in there because if you're disturbing somebody's peace, it doesn't matter what the decibel levels are. So that's the quandary that we face in the police department. We try to get everybody to abide by the decibel levels, but also we have to keep in mind that if somebody's saying that, hey, I'm being disturbed by this, regardless of what decibel level is out there, what noise level is out there, I don't like it. And that's kind of like the catch-22 that we're facing. There's two different sets of rules that we have to abide by. There's the civil or the town code and the state levels, and then there's the criminal levels that you have to look at. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's a quandary for us. And that's what we try to communicate with our partners, and they understand that too. We do that at the tavern meetings.
Have you received a great number of late complaints about, they did have their anniversary celebration recently.
Yeah.
Was that a tough weekend for you?
Yeah, it's not a frequent, but we do get occasional complaints. And I think that some of them are coming in from individuals that are appointed by other people in the neighborhoods, if I'm correct on that. So we get, if there's complaints, people have to complain and not just appoint one person, But usually when we do get them, they're addressed very quickly with whoever if it's independent or whoever, and they turn it down. It's not a problem. But it seems that when one person is disturbed, it plants the seed, and it happens again and again. So, as we've seen in the past from some of these locations, so it's a quandary for us.
And I could just add one more item to this whole debate here. The International Building Code is the agency that oversees that a tent or a membrane structure has to be receive a permit if it's greater than 400 square feet, which the tents that we're referring to are definitely greater than 400 square feet. In addition, it says that the tent cannot be up longer than 180 days in a 12-month period. And that's what the International Building Code says, and that's the code that we've adopted here in the town of Bel Air. Just to let you know that.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's important information as this whole Gordian knot is being worked on.
And it is a Gordian knot. When we last looked at this, one of the reasons I voted in favor of it was because I didn't want town businesses to be at a disadvantage compared to those in the county. The other reason I voted for this, it was my understanding that there was a plan to eventually have a permanent structure. So some of these other things that we were wrestling with would be cured. And I thought, well, they've got a little more time to take care of that. What they've done on that, I'm not sure. Whether they could conceivably be totally in compliance and finished by the end of March, I think is extremely doubtful. So now we are at the point where we are facing the expiration of this in fairly short order in government or construction time. One of the problems that I have with continuing, and I would never vote to continue this resolution, is that every other business in town has to comply with all of the parking rules, paving, stormwater management, landscaping. That is a problem for every business that we have. And IBC has not had to, because of the exemption that they have, comply with those things. So why shouldn't we do that for every business if we're gonna do it for one business? So for me, that's a hard no. They need to get that straightened out. The other issue is the tents and having it happens to have the same initials, the International Building Code. I was going to use IBC, but it's a different IBC. There's a rule against that, and we have adopted that code. So we really cannot turn a blind eye to that. So I'm not sure where we're going to end up, but that's where I currently stand today. The problem with the tents, other than the building code, is the noise issue. And we have gotten complaints from folks both in those condos and now on the opposite side of Main Street. And it apparently was, I think, one of the groups that was playing this weekend was particularly loud, and it was the Irish rock group. I had one person tell me they could hear every word that the singer was saying inside his home, and he found that to be somewhat troubling. People often don't want to call the police department with noise complaints, which I appreciate, but I'm encouraging them to call, because I also know that if you show up at IBC, you will be listened to and taken seriously. They're not, the bad neighborhood actors that are just going to totally blow you off. I know they won't do that. So that is another issue. So I'm going to educate anybody that complains. Call the police department. They will go over there and visit. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that the decibels are not always a good measure, because the booming bass will make your pictures rattle and will not violate the decibel standard. So the problem for me is the parking lot, which I think everybody's got to play by the same set of rules. It's not fair to our other businesses in town to let some businesses skate on that just because we started with the COVID problem and now we're in 2024 and COVID is well behind us. But the other problem is the noise problem for our residents. And my hat's off to IBC. I cannot imagine. If it were me, I think I would have been thrilled beyond my wildest dreams at the success of that business. They somehow stumbled onto or intentionally knew that this would be the greatest thing during COVID because people had a place to go. When I would walk around town everything was shut. IBC was always like a bright spot. There were people there. They were having a good time. They're socializing with friends. So, it is a great plus to our community, but we need to fix this problem. So
One thing-
that's sort of where I stand on it.
One thing to add about the parking lot, that is the stormwater management portion of that is state law. We cannot
Right,
do anything about that.
Right.
It is what it is.
right. So on some of these things, the window is closing and then things are going to have to be dealt with, and which is why we have tried to keep IBC apprised of this is only temporary so that they could plan and not be surprised. All right. Much to think about?
I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Future discussions? Anything else on the tent parking lot noise?
We will try to email out that comparison between the county and town.
What is the impact of this resolution on the parking requirement?
It doesn't, the way that it works now
Mm-hmm.
is that if you have outdoor dining, which the tents would be considered outdoor dining, you can't exceed 75% of the indoor dining. But you don't have to park for that outdoor dining as long as you don't exceed that 75%. If you do, then there's a calculation that's provided for that. In this case, the tents, through a I guess just unilateral effort by IBC, provided the parking. They weren't required to do so. They just put it in there because they knew that it was, and as a practical measure, it had to be there. Now, if the tents go and they reclaim the parking that's on there, they're basically back to where they were prior to COVID. But there's not near as much space for people to enjoy themselves as there is now.
One quick question, and I probably should know the answer to this. Who owns the parking next to M&J?
M&J.
M&J.
Yep.
Do they have an agreement with
They're leasing
IBC?
Yeah, I don't know where that is in the lease. I believe it's around 7 years left on the lease, but I can't say for sure.
Between the two of those businesses, they have
Right,
this
so
agreement.
IBC is leasing that property from M&J to park on.
And because they have this agreement, they don't, M&J and/or IBC doesn't have to improve that lot
Because
of the stormwater?
the town was very generous in allowing that lot to be used under the temporary use allowances under these various resolutions. So it was, what allows the tents to be there is also allowing the parking lot to be there. While the tents have a temporary use permit and a tent permit, the parking has nothing.
And nobody has to improve the parking lot?
If this expires, yes, they do. Either they improve it or they return it back to the way it was prior to COVID.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Much to think about? Any further questions? No? All right, in that case, we are up to commissioners' comments.
I'm commented out.
Commented out? I have one comment, and it's to Mr. Stephen Klein. I did not know that trash cans in the Major's Choice Park were in the works. I stumbled across it on social media, and I was thrilled because trash is a problem everywhere, but I feel like if you put a trash can out there, at least some of the people will use it. And I mean, and I went down and checked on them. They're there, and they are being used, both of them. So thank you for that. It's much appreciated. We want to keep our town and all of our parks tidy.
And they'll be collected once each week, ma'am.
Terrific.
Yep.
All right. Anything further? In that case, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I move that the meeting be adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner Rutledge. Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.